Hello and welcome to the ADGM Think series, where we explore what leaders across the financial market really think. My name is Gabriela Cirillo, and I'm a financial regulator here at Abu Dhabi Global Market. And I'm so happy to be here with my guest, Suneel Gokhale, co-founder and general partner from VentureSouq. Now, VentureSouq is a venture capital firm that focuses on early stage, high growth tech startups, particularly in fintech and climate tech. Is that correct? Is that your core focus, or have you changed focus?
No, I think as of right now, those are kind of two main product areas that we're working on. We can of course get into how we're thinking about those and how we're thinking about kind of the future of VentureSouq and new opportunity sets. But yeah, I'd say that's fairly accurate. I got to be careful. I'm speaking with the regulator, so I have to.
Well, exactly. I know.
I'm kidding.
I'm just gonna throw one very off question your way straight away to really get it started. But you are at ADGM, you are with a financial regulator. So I'm going to ask you just one clear-cut question.
Of course.
Why fintech?
Why fintech? Sure.
I mean, it's a hard industry. Why fintech? Why is an investor
we like
looking
it?
at fintech?
We like it because it is a hard industry. And so for us, really, where we kind of got to fintech as being kind of our first institutional fund is that we had, the history of VentureSouq is we started essentially investing in 2015, deal by deal, kind of global, and we had made a number of fintech investments globally. And so when we thought about rolling out our first product focused in our own backyard in the region, we thought about developing a thesis around fintech based on kind of the data and the information that we could pull from some of these global investments that we'd made for 3 or 4 years before launching our first fund, which was a fintech fund focused on the region in 2021. And so we all kind of came from financial services backgrounds or had a certain kind of expertise and experience there. Our existing or legacy portfolio had a number of fintech companies, so a good amount of fintech exposure across markets that we thought were very similar to MENA, such as LATAM, Southeast Asia. And so we thought that we'd be effective in putting together a thesis and rolling out our first product in the area of fintech.
Okay, makes sense. I mean, let me roll it back a bit, because evidently on one hand, fintech is a hard industry, but also it takes a special kind of person to really want to be innovating in finance. It's a highly regulated industry. You're going to hit a lot of roadblocks. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself first? Like how much time have you been in the UAE? How did you first get started into finance?
Of course. Sure. So I've been in the UAE now 11 years. I'm a lawyer by training, kind of private equity, investment funds, M&A. And so moved over here as a lawyer, and then ultimately, after a couple of years, went on to become a senior investment lawyer at one of the large sovereign wealth funds here in Abu Dhabi, where I was, of course, on the legal side, but started to kind of immerse myself on the business side of investment transactions, whether direct or through investment funds, and started to kind of learn about the investment business there. And, there's not a better place to learn than kind of a large, allocator that's kind of investing in all the biggest funds and all the best deals globally. From there, spending 4 or 5 years there, spinning out and starting VentureSouq with my partners. I'd say, I've been been here for 11 years, but really in the kind of in the investment business for 9 or 10 years.
Okay, interesting. So basically, you did the opposite of me. You're a lawyer that became a venture capitalist, whereas I'm a venture capitalist that became a regular. Who does that? You chose the smart path.
Both interesting journeys. We could chop that up, another time maybe.
So, I mean, we did mention, fintech being a core focus, but also climate tech, which is very, very topical at the moment, especially COP28 coming up. Mm-hmm. And evidently, within a financial center, we're very interested about, sustainable finance and ways to marry the two. But what are your current objectives for this year, for the next, 3 years? How are you rolling out this fund, and where are you seeing these areas really growing across both sectors?
Sure, Sharon, really good question. So for us right now, we are kind of we're very, in the short to medium term, we're kind of laser focused on executing on our current strategies. So in 2021, we launched our first fintech fund. That was a $50 million fund. That was focused, almost entirely on the region.
Is it all out?
It's fully deployed,
okay.
And now we're.
How long did it take you to deploy?
About a couple of years.
It's not easy, right?
It's kind of you have ebbs and flows, but it was a very interesting time for us to start deploying into regional fintech, because we think, particularly within our portfolio, a number of the foundational fintech companies in the region were kind of built in that vintage. And so we're excited about that portfolio. But with that said, we think we're in very, very early innings when it comes to the acceleration of fintech in the region. and there's a ton of opportunity here
Can
still.
I ask for
Of course,
some maybe, names that our audience will know of that you've
Sure.
invested?
Of course. So we've invested in companies like Tabby, Husby, Abi Finance, which is started in Pakistan, has now kind of moved over to the region, and a number a number of others. Yassir, which is Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, just raised a large round led by Bond. So we're excited about that super app with a fintech wedge. And so yeah, there's a number of companies there that we think will ultimately become generational companies in and around that vintage. And so we're excited to have that fully deployed. But we think there's a whole universe of opportunities over the next 10, 15 years in fintech in the region that we're going to continue to deploy into through Fund 2, Fund 3, Fund 4. So right now we're progressing Fund 2.
Okay, so Fund 2, getting money or deploying money?
So we're doing both. So we've started to raise, we started to commit to investments. Obviously, it's a different time now on the raising and deployment side. 2023 is a lot different than 2020 and 2021, but we think ultimately this vintage is going to perform very, very well because we think quality of founders is still super strong. Valuations have come down. Deal flow has gotten to a more manageable place, and so we're actually as or if not more excited about this vintage than
expectations might be a little bit lower as well from the startup founders.
From the allocators. I think everyone is kind of leveled off a little bit and come back to earth. I think after a very, very crazy, call it 3, 4, 5 years, but who knows?
No, that's true. So in that case, for founders who potentially want you as an investor and want you to have their back, what are some of the key metrics you look at? What should they be focusing on? And any tips, anything that really gives you oomph of value? And
Sure, yeah. So there's kind of the qualitative and the quantitative. So on the qualitative side, we're still looking at tier 1 generational founders. And it's sometimes not easy to quantify. Oftentimes you just kind of know it when you see it. And now because we've made so many investments kind of in our legacy model, and now through the fund, we kind of have a good sense of what we think like a 10x founder is going to look like.
Okay, explain to me a tier 1 generational founder. I'm guessing it has to do with someone who's going to create a company that's going to just carry on past them being CEO. Sure. Is that correct? Is that
sure? Sometimes that's a good thing where someone who founds a business ultimately, as the company gets to a growth stage, leaves and decides they're not the person to take this company going forward. Sometimes that founder stays all the way through and they kind of continue to level up, and starting as a seed stage company going all the way to a public company or a company that is acquired by a global strategic. For us, it's really, you're looking for drive, you're looking on focus on a problem that a particular founder, he or she, is super passionate about. And is kind of dedicating their lives to. This is not unfortunately, being a founder, like being a VC, is not a 9 to 5. It's you live and breathe it. And so we kind of see that passion. Obviously, having, relevant experience and all of that is of course, it's kind of a tick the box exercise. But for us, we're looking for resilience, we're looking for drive, we're looking for passion, we're looking for incredible bandwidth, because being a founder is an incredibly challenging job, and you've got to be able to, a CEO, he or she has to be able to kind of move across different segments very, very quickly, make decisions, absorb a ton of information, and make those decisions in situations where you're either kind of, your experiences on a day-to-day for a founder is kind of like, I forgot who said it, but it was kind of like exhilaration and terror. It's like that's like your life every day, and so you got to be able to kind of like
on the edge, right?
Yeah, it's constantly on the edge. Honestly, it's managing your emotions, all of that sort of stuff.
Oof. I mean, you're not selling it, to be honest, right now.
It's not for everyone, and I think honestly, this, if you want to call it a downturn or a correction, has made that, I think, abundantly clear to a lot of people. Not a normative statement on anybody, but I think in this particular fundraising environment, in this particular economy. I think some people have said, you know what, perhaps being a founder is not for me. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a great job and having a long career and doing that. And so it's definitely not for the faint of heart.
That is most definitely true, especially after seeing so many founders, push their ideas out and then realize that fundamentally, sometimes things simply don't stick. I guess when it comes down to that, it does make me wonder, are you seeing any sort of trends that are appearing in the UAE about fintech models that are already coming to life? Are you seeing, is it more like maybe copycat models that are coming from abroad that are being imported in, or are there, more startups that are really coming from a more grassroots level and fulfilling needs that they see here? What are you currently seeing in the space?
I think we're seeing a little bit of both, to be honest. I think if you zoom out,
no judgment on either one.
No, not at all.
Great ideas everywhere.
Not at all. I think some of the most successful stories in emerging markets have been copycats of things that are started other places. But we do think, particularly with fintech, and I think it probably applies to a certain degree across different other segments, is that fintech is local first primarily. It's because of having to deal with, kind of cultural differences in what kind of consumers and businesses and purchasers of services need. Regulations are differences. Scaling going, well, especially in a market like this. We're not the US, we're not China, we're not India, where it's a unified market. We're much more akin to a place like LATAM, where you've got a collection of smaller countries relatively that make up a large area.
Each with their own institution.
Each with their own institutions. Some common underlying or underpinning cultural similarities around language or religion. But still, you have to, if you're building something in Mexico, you've got to go to Brazil, you've got to go to Colombia. Same with here. You're building something in the UAE, you want to go to Saudi, you want to go to other markets. You've got to, scaling across into those markets is not easy. And the business is not just fintech businesses, but businesses in general, startups that have done well, like a Kareem or et cetera, have been able to go across different markets. And so we think that we think that if you're going to do copycats from other places, you still have to tailor the business locally. But with that said, we are seeing in fintech, local stories, companies that are kind of inherently MENA or inherently kind of emerging market, that, things that might do well here that wouldn't probably do well in the US. And so there's a little bit of both.
Very nice. Very nice. I guess also it must take a lot of emotional intelligence to be a founder, and emotional intelligence in order to tailor these products to a local ecosystem regardless. Because as a financial regulator, we have a lot of firms that come in and they want to set up and, they tell us this amazing story of what they've done in the past and in other jurisdictions. And unfortunately, we have to tell them, okay, so what? What does that mean to us here in the UAE? What are you offering? What are you proposing to us? How are you going to make the
with a different set of expectations
better?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's always very often you get sort of a blank response because they realize that, you can't copy paste exactly. We are very much our own country and our own expectations, and we expect that same sort of support coming back from founders coming here. Okay, I guess also one of the things that, is part and parcel of being part of, a maturing fintech ecosystem is there are ways to improve how we do it and how stakeholders participate and work together. Do you have any recommendations, or how would you like to see the ecosystem evolve in a way that would maybe better nurture or better help, launch more founders into the space?
Sure. So I think a lot of those things are already in motion, and it's just a matter of kind of continuing the good work that's already happened. So as you mentioned right at the beginning, that, fintech is challenging. A lot of it due to, the heavy regulatory nature of a lot of the businesses or key segments within fintech. So I think, 5-10 years ago, you didn't have ADGM, you didn't have sandboxes, you didn't have all these kind of programs here in Saudi, in Bahrain, that are looking to kind of essentially provide opportunities for founders to build either alongside traditional financial services companies or compete with them to a certain extent or partner with them. And so I think, and ultimately consumers and businesses who are the buyers of those services will ultimately benefit, which is what you're looking to solve for eventually. So I think on the regulatory side, that's already in motion in a number of areas and a number of geographies, core markets within the UAE. I also think, it's the ecosystem is still really, really nascent, but it's getting, you're starting to have, a key part of when, let's just say like Silicon Valley or other similar markets they started to develop, was when you started to have founders exiting and building companies again, or going and becoming investors and providing their expertise to help founders build again. And so you're starting to have.
You're referring to the PayPal mafia.
Yeah, the PayPal mafia, and so to a certain, and there's other pockets that have kind of emerged in Silicon Valley and other parts of the world. But you're starting to see that here with companies getting to a certain stage where founders are now starting to leave, spending their time, in a good way, leaving those businesses on good terms and starting to build.
So who's our mafia? Who's our mafia? Because we have the Grab mafia in Asia and the Korean mafia. I think we have the Korean mafia. Is it a mafia yet at this point?
It's getting there. It's getting there. Look, I think we've got we spend a good amount of our time talking to ex-Kareemers that are looking to build and have done what they're supposed to do at Kareem and fulfill their obligations there, and now they're looking to solve more specific problems that they probably were able to recognize being part of Kareem, and you're starting to see that, which is a really, really good thing. And we're also starting to see it not just from Kareem, but from other founders that are, we talk to a lot of, even in a lot of the good CEOs of the kind of companies that are starting to get the growth stage, starting to realize and say, hey, look, like we're starting to become, we think ultimately we will become an accelerator of talent, which is not a bad thing. Someone comes there and gives you everything for 5, 6, 7, 10 years, and they want to go build something great, and the good founders will say, I'm going to be the first person to write a check, an angel check into that company. So, and for us, that's huge because that's a key source of deal flow for us is really good founders recommending other good founders. I think
a vetted warm intro, basically.
Absolutely.
So what does success look like for you? And I don't mean it just from the startup side, but I mean as an investment fund, evidently.
Sure.
Is it going to the next stage of a deal? Is it, an IPO in the region? What is success for you?
Yeah, so I think for me, I spend a lot of time on the business of VentureSouq. And so for me, it's essentially, being laser focused, obviously, on our existing strategies, making sure we're executing as best as we can on those as we start to hopefully build a franchise around fintech and then climate, but also at the same time thinking about what the next opportunities look like. And so from a VentureSouq perspective, it's continuing to grow. It's continuing to have, an amazing team because we've leveled up our team in the last 2 or 3 years, from starting as kind of 4 founders off the side of our desk, now growing into a team of 13 people has been great for us, multi-jurisdictional, which is fantastic. And so for us, it's just continuing to scale and becoming the flagship venture capital firm, or that's our goal in the region. I think for the region as an investor, that's part of a larger ecosystem. Yes, absolutely. You'd love to see a couple of IPOs. You'd love to see a major strategic come in and acquire, similar to the Kareem story. You'd like to see a little bit more of that. You'd love to see, but beyond that, because those are just outcome driven in terms of the process, what you want to see is just great founders continuing to kind of pop their heads up and build generational companies, and the exits will come. Like, I think people focus on that, obviously, because we're all here to kind of deliver returns to our investors, and our investors expect that, and so do founders. But what we want to see is really kind of exceptional founders continuing to build companies that are solving real problems on the ground here, because I think there's still there's been incredible progress, particularly in fintech, where we've been really, really focused. But we do think that there's a whole host of challenges and issues that are yet to be solved, and we're looking forward to kind of seeing founders come in and kind of tackle those head on.
Very nice, very nice. Before we wrap up, can I ask you one final question?
Sure.
I mean, we said that VentureSouq is very focused on fintech, but I don't want to be greedy. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about the climate tech aspect and the climate tech focus? Because as we know, this is a very important area, and you did mention that it was strategic areas that are part of your success.
Absolutely. So we've at VentureSouq, we've obviously been focused on fintech the last few years, and dating back to our legacy portfolio, but also climate and climate tech has been a big part of our story. And so we are kind of in the midst of we've done kind of legacy investments in those areas, almost as beta investments to develop a thesis around what investing money primarily from the MENA region into global opportunities around climate and impact more broadly would look like. And so now we're in the midst of launching what will be a new fund, kind of focused on climate, but it'll be kind of food tech, financial inclusion, and a few related areas. And so stay tuned. There'll be more around that, particularly as we get to COP. We're going to have a huge presence there, and we'll be kind of involved in a lot of the stuff going on, particularly here in Abu Dhabi. So we're excited.
Wonderful. Well, Suneel, thank you so much for being,
My pleasure.
part of this initiative.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And also thank you for, your very active involvement in the fintech scene, and for your future active involvement in the climate tech scene.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Thank you.